Welcome to this week's edition of Draft Utopia. Chris Ransom here along with Andrew Kermish and Joseph Potter. Today we'll be breaking down college football Week 3. We previewed some Week 2 NFL games on the Evolution Network. We'll recap one of those games that we previewed in depth as well a little bit later in the show. But the first game I want to get to is the game between the Louisville Cardinals and the Clemson Tigers, and Clemson just demolished Lamar Jackson. Heading into this game, my thought process was Lamar is QB1, and this game, going up against a team that led the FBS in sacks last year, if he has a statement game versus this defense, then he's going to be in the driver's seat. But what ended up happening is Lamar Jackson, while he did end up 21 for 42, 317 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, he was 8 for 20 in the first half. But he ended the day 21 for 42, 317 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 1 interception. He had 1 touchdown in the first half, but his quarterback rating was 27.2, which was a career low for Lamar Jackson. So he had 64 rushing yards on top of that as well. But this is not the kind of game you're hoping for if you're Lamar Jackson. I don't think this takes him out of the first round, but I do think it takes him out of the conversation to be the top overall pick. And the 2 quarterbacks I'm really looking at as that candidate or as that guy are Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen, who they're both number 1 and number 2 in both Tony and Mark's mock drafts now. So those are the top 2 quarterbacks, and I just feel like Rosen had a great game, over 400 yards against Memphis despite making some mistakes at the end, and Darnold had no timeouts versus Texas with 39 seconds left, and he still managed to get USC into overball downfield, showing clutch poise and leading USC to a victory in overtime. So you can't teach that. You either have that or you don't, and Darnold showed that he had that. Rosen showed he had that in Week 1, and Baker Mayfield had another strong outing as well against a Tulane defense that features cornerback Perry Nickerson, who reminds me a lot of Richard Sherman. So Baker had another strong game too. Mason Rudolph had 400 yards in the first half at Heinz Field, and Lamar was sort of the weak link this week. I mean, he still had a solid game with over 300 yards, and he had a phenomenal fourth quarter, but the first 3 quarters he was just mediocre, and the first half he was just garbage. So, I mean, it's really difficult to say at this point. Lamar was still better than Josh Allen, who began the game 3 for 14 but got benched. What are your thoughts on this quarterback race at this point, Joey, before we get to the Texans game? Because Clemson just outplayed Louisville. There's no other way to put it, and we'll get to the other former Clemson quarterback in a second here when we break down the Texans-Bengals game, which was just brutal. But this quarterback race, Lamar had a window of opportunity. He didn't seize it. He'll still probably get picked in the first round, but at the same time, this was a huge opportunity he blew to separate himself from Darnold, Rosen, Baker Mayfield, and we'll see what happens, but that this was not the impression Lamar wanted to make.
Well, here's the thing. Lamar Jackson just didn't get it. He put up a dud. I've seen quarterbacks come back from this and do well. You know, even getting the number 1 overall pick. But you're looking at going into a quarterback class that could potentially be loaded. When you're going into a quarterback class that could potentially be loaded, you're going to have problems. Now, he played a team that didn't have the same defense that it did last year. That has have the same quality of players they had last year. They're still a good defense, but nothing like they were a year prior. Now, compare that to Baker Mayfield, who you put earlier. He was against Tulane. He had his worst game of the year against Tulane. That worst game of the year was 17 for 27, 63% passing, 331 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. That was the worst game of the year for Baker Mayfield. Okay? Compare that to the worst game of the season for every other quarterback. Well, it's still better than some of their best games. So, the 2 most impressive quarterbacks this year, and I think right now are probably the 2 most impressive quarterbacks this year, are Josh Rosen and Baker Mayfield. And if they do what they've been doing the previous 3 weeks for another 2 or 3 weeks, those 2 are going to be the top 2 quarterbacks in the nation. They're going to be the top 2 quarterbacks going into the draft, and these other quarterbacks are going to be far behind them, because these 2 guys right now are raising the bar. And if Lamar or any of those other guys, Darnold, are even going to think about catching up, they're going to have to put together some Herculean-type games, because right now they're getting blown out.
Well, USC's 3-0, and they beat 3 teams that had NFL cornerbacks on them, and Darnold had a very good game against Stanford last week. He had a very poor game against Western Michigan, and he had a so-so game versus Texas, but he was clutch, and that's what people are going to look at.
Well, that's what people are going to look at. The scouts are going to look at the overall picture as well. And the overall picture of Mayfield and Rosen right now is a heck of a lot better than what anybody else is putting up.
I still think Darnold has the highest ceiling, but at the same time, if you're just looking at this from a production standpoint, Baker Mayfield and Josh Rosen are running away with this thing.
Well, let's put it this way. It came out after the draft that most scouts thought that the highest ceiling in this year's draft belonged to Deshaun Kaiser, because he's 21 and he has all the physical and mental tools, but he has a lot of refinement to do. He went in the 2nd round. So you're talking about Sam Darnold. If he has the highest ceiling, doesn't mean he's not going to go in the 2nd round if he can't get his stuff together now.
It could very well happen, but I think the odds of that happening at this point are extremely unlikely.
They are unlikely, but we also said it was unlikely that Kaiser would go in the 2nd round. He went in the 2nd round. What you have to look at, you have to look at what they're doing. Remember, they're not just going to judge you on this year or last year. They're going to judge you on all 3 years, the progression you've made. And that's where you have to look. Where has the progression stopped, and what's he doing now with it? He's been extremely inconsistent. As you said, a great game, a mediocre game, and an alright game. That's not good. So, if he doesn't pick it up, he may be looking at being the number 3 quarterback in this class by midseason.
Yeah, but nobody's going to move Darnold down until USC loses a game because they're not. Because right now, the way they're playing, they're doing just enough to win. But I think the reason USC's having success is they've got a wide receiver named Deontay Burnett who has really bailed Darnold out early in the season this year. All of the rest of his incompletions, when you look at the statistics, are results of drop passes by the receivers. So scouts are not going to blame that on Darnold as much as they're going to blame that on his receivers.
Oh, you know who's going to move him down if he doesn't pick it up? Me. Because, let's face it, scouts are going to say, why didn't he elevate his team? Why didn't he elevate his player? Because something you're seeing from Rosen, something you've seen from Mayfield, is that whether people like Rosen or not, he is elevating his player. Whether you like Mayfield or you don't, he is elevating his player. Is Darnold elevating his teammates?
I believe he is because he still had 397 yards against Texas, who has an NFL corner in Holland, who's pretty good, and they've got Burnett, so 397 yards versus Texas. He had more passing yards in this game, but this is also his third game in a row with double-digit interceptions. So there are moments where he's shown he can make those NFL throws, but you also have those moments where there's terrible decision-making. So people are sort of on the fence still.
Chris, tell me, are these players, is he making an average player into an elite player? Is he making...
Yes, he's making Deontay Burnett, a guy who dropped 3 passes, look like a first-round pick.
Okay, and that's something we got to look at, because that is something that you'll look heavy into. I'm looking at what he's done this season here. 4 interceptions, 4 touchdowns, one touchdown interception.
Well, those numbers are outdated. Those numbers are outdated because ESPN did not update those numbers after the Texas game. So if you add up what he did in the Texas game, he has a 66.6 completion percentage. He has 1,002 passing yards. He has 7 passing touchdowns and 6 interceptions.
Yeah, the numbers are actually updated here on ESPN.com. I'm looking at them now.
Yeah, so it's still pretty much a 1-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, but still it's good.
That isn't terrible.
7 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. His overall completion percentage is still good, like you said, you know. That touchdown to interception ratio, that's going to stick out like a sore thumb. Because that's going to tell people that he has poor decision making. And people are going to have to look back at the tape and find out why and whether it's correct.
I believe it
Maybe
is.
Just because his receivers... Oh, everything he does is correct. I see enough tape about that. Everything he does is absolutely correct. It's just whether the coaches want to continue to work with him long-term to correct it, which right now it doesn't look like they do.
Yeah, and Stanford had 2 NFL corners, and Darnold picked both of those guys apart, which is basically the biggest reason why I have Darnold hanging on by a thread to that number 1 spot. But at the same time, the moment he has a game where he has multiple interceptions and USC loses, that's probably when most other people are going to start moving him down. But I think from a mental and tangible standpoint, the safest player you can get is Baker Mayfield. But from a long-term, high-upside standpoint, I'd lean towards Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen. But I think Baker Mayfield's certainly a top 3 quarterback in this class. Is he going to do enough to go into the top 5? That's debatable because he's only 6'1", and some scouts are going to knock him for that. So we'll see what happens. He'll probably have one of the better careers, though.
Yeah, well, you have to look, too. Drew Brees was taking, second round, I think it was.
Yes.
Or late first, second round.
He was the 32nd pick in a 31-team league.
Yeah, and he's had a pretty good career so far. So I just want to look at, and it's basically what we're telling people is this quarterback group right now is basically a three-horse race. Darnold,
Rosen and Mayfield.
Darnold, Rosen, and Mayfield.
Because I'm going to update
right
the QB rankings later this week, and those are going to be the top three. Darnold, Rosen, and Mayfield. Those are going to be the top three in the QB rankings, and Mason Rudolph and Lamar are basically tied for the number 4 spot now. But I'm leaning Rudolph over Lamar, but it's close. It's tough to say at this point. There's still a lot of football left to be played.
Yeah, and right now, between those three, it's too close to call on what you want because of different situations. There are 3 different types of quarterbacks, different strengths, different weaknesses. Darnold, I am still highly skeptical of because of his mechanics. It looks like he fixed a little bit of it, but as messed up as they were, that's going to take time to fix. That's not something you can just fix in one offseason.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out because Jake Browning had a strong game, 19 for 22, but he played a Fresno State team. Mason Rudolph had 400 yards in the first half. I think the biggest upset was unranked Mississippi State slaughtering LSU, number 12 LSU, 37-7. And Nick Fitzgerald only had 180 passing yards, but people are saying he's going to get drafted ahead of Dak Prescott, even though he's an underclassman. Also, San Diego State beat number 19 Stanford in a home upset. So there were quite a bit of upsets this week. Memphis beat UCLA too.
I'll give you another upset that nobody saw coming. That was Vanderbilt beating Kansas State.
That's true, but they're an SEC team. They're in a better conference.
It's Vanderbilt, which has no history of doing. That was their first win over a ranked non-SEC team in 69 years.
Yeah, that is impressive. Vanderbilt
is not known for their football team. Vanderbilt is more known for their basketball and baseball team.
Especially their baseball team.
Their baseball team, they have like a pitcher in the MLB draft every year for Vanderbilt.
So you have to say this was a huge upset for Vanderbilt. In fact, you have a lot of people in the SEC usually do the big laughing stock of the football during the football season is Vanderbilt, which is getting more respectable, but it also can Kentucky.
Yeah, I'll give you one more upset. California Golden Bears defeated Ole Miss in front of their home crowd, 27-16.
I would call that an upset for say, because Ole Miss is down and dealing with all the stuff that's happened with the state. So it's fallout from the.
Well, Ole Miss has a lot of players in the 2019 class that are very talented, very high prospects. California, nobody really expected California to come out and be 3-0 to begin the year and beat an SEC team. So I'm counting that.
I was just based on the players that they have, and it was Ole Miss. I don't know if Ole Miss is always self-imposed that scholarship because or not.
I think the only quarterback that's really hurt his stock at this point is Josh Allen out of Wyoming. He began the game 3 for 14 versus Oregon and then got benched. So he's had 2 terrible games against Power 5 schools.
That means he's he's probably off the radar, especially coming out of the Wyoming.
Yep.
It's never had a strong program.
All right, we'll get to one more game, but do you want to get to the Notre Dame-Boston College game now before we get into the Thursday night game, or do you want to wait and go back, like rotate?
Yeah, let's do it now.
All right. Because Florida did win on a Hail Mary against Tennessee. SMU, Cortland Sutton had 0 receptions against TCU. So I just wanted to throw that out of the way before we get to the Boston College Notre Dame game. And this was a game where Mike McGlinchey struggled a little bit early, but he bounced back and he played pretty dominant. When he was one-on-one with Harold Landry, he won all the matchups. So that's one thing that really worked in Mike McGlinchey's favor. Quentin Nelson also won a vast majority of his matchups as well. Harold Landry also tripped on a play where Notre Dame's quarterback scrambled to the end zone. And I don't know if it's as much as Landry or as much as it is the coaching, because the coaches wanted to save him for the fourth quarter. They only wanted to use him on 2 downs in the first 3 quarters and then save him for the fourth quarter, hoping it would tire Notre Dame out. But that strategy backfired so badly, and it was working early in the game, but Notre Dame just ran away with the game at the end. So,
yeah, well, here's the thing. The Notre Dame, this was a bounce-back game for their offensive line. Nelson and McGlinchey had really poor first games. Today,
those guys dominated versus Temple, but they sucked versus Georgia.
Okay, second game. Sorry, I was thinking this week too. NFL mindset here. But they had really bad games. They came out this game and they dominated. And it was, like I said, before I got on here, I was talking to people earlier, I said this was a bounce-back game, and this was a statement game for these offensive linemen for Notre Dame. And yeah, you thought we were losing our touch. We're going to come out here. Did everything about this game. Anybody who lined up against them, they dominated them. And I think it's a statement game. This puts them right back up where they were before, because they were just battering people. And McGlinchey, he has all the makings of both an all-pro. He does have the makings of an all-pro left tackle, but quite frankly, he has the makings of a Hall of Fame right tackle. So, I mean, you can play him and he'll be successful at either one. So, he's just got to put it all together more consistently. And if he plays like he did this last game, he'll be the first tackle taken.
Yeah. Trey Adams gained a little bit of a lead.
This game, he'll be a top 10 pick. So,
yeah, Trey Adams I gave Trey Adams a slight lead over McGlinchey last week because he just dominated, and his one issue was maintaining blocks. He's corrected that, and he has the best foot speed of any tackle in the draft. So that's why Trey Adams is number 1 at the moment. But I do believe McGlinchey is the only tackle in the draft capable of surpassing him now, because while Western Michigan won, their running game with Jarvian Franklin has been a huge disappointment. Okorafor's still been effective on some blocks, but he's not on the level that McGlinchey or Adams is, and Connor Williams got injured, the Texas left tackle. He got injured versus the USC Trojans, and that's a huge loss for Texas. So I don't know the severity of the injury yet. That's something we're going to need to look into in the coming weeks, but that's a loss for Texas. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why they lost. But you got to give them credit for pushing USC to double overtime. Northern Illinois upset Nebraska. Florida beat Tennessee on a Hail Mary. So a few things. We've spent about 25 minutes talking about everything that happened in college football this week. So we will move over from Lamar Jackson, Louisville, to the quarterback that beat Lamar Jackson, making his NFL debut, Deshaun Watson, who we previewed on the Evolution Network Thursday. Do you want to talk about what he did? You want to lead this segment off, Joey?
Which game?
It's the Texans-Bengals game. I have the recap up on this.
Yeah, this game was one. I don't think this game was what we thought it would be, but at the same time, I think that the game made a statement as to what was going to happen in the future. Lamar Jackson is one of those players. I don't think the Texans would have won this game without him in there. I don't think they would have won with Tom Savage. At the same time, he didn't have a great game, but he gave the Texans leadership. He gave defenses something to. If you have Tom Savage in there, there's no preparation really needed. He's not going to do much. Just play your normal defense. With Jackson.
You mean Deshaun Watson? It's easy to get the two mixed up, but yeah.
Watson, sorry. You got me stuck on Jackson earlier. With Watson, he's athletic. He's got leadership ability. He's got a strong arm. You have to prepare for him, whether he does well or not. And I think he only had 200 or 125 yards passing, but at the same time, you had to prepare for him. Now, so I think that they ended up doing a really good job with him. And then you had the Cincinnati players who Cincinnati fired their offensive coordinator. That's expected because somebody's got to take the fall for that.
Well, I think the biggest reason the Texans won, I'm going to give Watson credit because his touchdown was the only touchdown of the game, so he deserves credit for winning and leading that team and avoiding turnovers, playing smart. But this is the biggest reason the Texans won. Cincinnati's opening drive in the third quarter lasted 8 minutes and 34 seconds, and Houston held them to a field goal. So Houston led 10-6 at halftime thanks to the Watson touchdown, and the Bengals had an 8-minute, 34-second drive to begin the second half, but Houston held them to a field goal. If Cincinnati scores a touchdown on that drive, this game goes to overtime, and who knows what happens in that scenario. Maybe the Bengals win, maybe it's a tie, maybe the Texans still win, but that changed the outcome of the game. That was huge for the Texans, limiting the Bengals to a field goal on an 8-minute, 34-second drive to begin the second half. That was huge defensive stop for the Texans.
Well, not only that, I want you to look at this. Andy Dalton, like we were talking about on the Evolution Network, set up, and he was 20 for 35 for 224 yards. Now, I want you to look at what Dalton has done over the last 2 years. Because remember, up through 2015, Andy Dalton's offensive coordinator from 2013 to 2015 was Hugh Jackson. Those were the best years of his career. Without Hugh Jackson, he's gone. Last year he had 64% completions. This year he has 54. 64% completions are good. His yards per from 2015 to 2016, both years have gone down. 7.5, this year 6.0. He went from 25 touchdowns and 7 interceptions in 2015 to 18 touchdowns, 8 interceptions last year, and no touchdowns, 4 interceptions this year. He went from 20 sacks to 41 sacks without Jackson, and he's already got 8 sacks this year. He's holding the ball too long. He is, as gradually as he progressed with Hugh Jackson, he is gradually regressing without it. Now, what's this do? It's like we said, this is the end of the line in Cincinnati for Andy Dalton. If Andy Dalton doesn't pick things up, Deshaun Watson showed that he could be the future of the Texans, whether for the skills or just pure leadership, he could be the leader of the Texans. While for the Bengals, Andy Dalton's starting to show, hey, I may have been the product of really good coaching. And that's never a good thing if you're a quarterback.
Because good coaching will only get you so far, and Dalton was always one of those guys where you felt like he was effective, but you knew he wasn't going to take that next step. And when the Bengals extended him, they were basically stalling. They were buying time because they knew they had a good thing going. They didn't want to ruin it. But now it's like the offensive line's falling apart. You have a buyout with Dalton after this year. A.J. McCarron's in a contract year. And even though we want to talk about how bad this offensive line is, Andy Dalton's the quarterback. He's getting paid big money. He's getting paid top 10, top 15 quarterback money. So if he's struggling, they're going to make a change. And he's going to be held accountable regardless of the situation, because that's how it works in the NFL.
Well, here's a question. Do you think Cincinnati will draft a quarterback so they can buy out Andy Dalton after this year, and McCarron does not, just on the off chance that McCarron signs with another team to potentially be a starter? Or will Cincinnati have to guarantee McCarron the starting job for him to really take time?
What would have to happen for McCarron to re-sign is he would have to come in and take over and turn the Bengals around, and then they'd extend him and they'd cut Dalton to save over $18 million in cap space, which they could use on another offensive lineman. They could use that money on Nate Soldier for the Patriots, because I'm pretty sure Belichick's not going to pay Nate Soldier more than $10 million a year after taking Antonio Garcia and Connor McDermott in last year's draft. So I'm looking at that as a potential target. There's some other offensive linemen that could hit the market as well at the left tackle position. So I'm looking at the Bengals as a team that, if they do go that route, that actually benefits them, because if McCarron plays well, you can use free agency to get one offensive lineman, you can draft another, and McCarron will have a better chance of succeeding in that situation. But again, fixing this offensive line and making sure you have a quarterback is a top priority. And this scenario you're bringing up, it's actually been pitched to me on a few Facebook groups. After I posted mocks, Bengals fans are saying, we should get a quarterback in the first round and a left tackle in the second round. So the scenario you're describing to me, Kerm, has actually been pitched to me. It's not as crazy as you think, Joey.
I don't think Cincinnati should get a quarterback in the first round. Because if you get a quarterback in the first round, you pretty much are expecting him to play right away. I would wait till at least the second round. Hopefully give him a year to develop. If you do sign McCarron to be the starter next year.
Well, it depends on if they keep both quarterbacks or move on from both. It's too early to say what the Bengals are going to do.
Yeah, I think I heard that I think they will either cut Dalton or at least bench him if he keeps on this string.
I would not rule that possibility out. I think that is extremely realistic. All right, we'll get to my top 5 fullbacks now, and then we'll get to some other fun stuff, which is because I know there's other sports besides the NFL that Lisa wants us to talk about. So I'm going to get the fullbacks out of the way. And this is probably the only show this year where we...
Other than the NFL? I didn't know this.
There's different things coming up. NHL starts next month. The MLB playoffs start in October. So I'm just previewing some of those things and getting that as out of the way as quickly as possible. But we'll start with the fullbacks here.
I didn't know any other sport existed.
We know the NFL is king, okay? We know that. That's obvious. Dimitri Flowers is easily the top fullback in the country right now, and one of Baker Mayfield's best weapons. I mean, you're talking about a north-south runner. The vision's there, the blocking's there, physical tools, durability, 6'2", 247, pass blocks, runs with a lot of power and intensity. He can catch out of the backfield. He can line up as a tight end. He presents a mismatch in the slot. He's an excellent route runner. You'd like to see him generate more rushing yards and get a rushing touchdown, but you also want to see him jump and make catches like a real tight end. Other than that, there really aren't any weaknesses to Flowers' game. You're probably looking at a day 3 pick, but Mark has a 3rd-round grade on Dimitri Flowers, so keep an eye on Oklahoma's running back. He's probably Oklahoma's fullback. He did a great job blocking for Mixon and Perrine last year. So Dimitri Flowers, 36 on Oklahoma. I'm sure you've seen him in a few plays at times when Baker Mayfield got him involved in the offense, Joey. I'm sure you've seen Flowers do some good things. But he's the top fullback in this year's draft. Are you unfamiliar with Flowers? Should I just move on to the next fullback?
Well, you're talking about him like he's Pinocchio. It's the real boy thing keeps coming up into my mind when you said that. The thing is, he's playing fullback, but he's more of an H-back. Right? He can do all the things that H-back can do. So that's probably how he'll be drafted, not as a pure fullback.
But he's 247. They might convert him to tight end.
Well, a lot of H-backs are running back, fullback, tight end hybrids. So, I mean, that's one of those things. They will line him up at tight end. They will line him up at fullback. They will line him up in the wing. They will line him up. And by a wing, I don't mean out as a receiver. I mean the wing backfield. So for a player like that, they can line him up in several different situations.
If let's look at, for comparison for an H-back, let's look at the Titans take Justin Bowers.
Yeah, or if you want to go historical reference, look at fullback. Fullback, I use the term lightly, Natron Means. He's the one who really brought there really was no H-back before Means. He really brought that position into the forefront as somebody who could play all those positions. So, I mean, so there are places for guys like that, and let's face it, guess who brought Marshall Falk who mentored Marshall Falk? Natron Means. Because they took Means, he was the Chargers starting, I think it was the Chargers. No, it was the Rams. He was the Rams starting running back when Marshall Falk was drafted.
Marshall Falk was drafted on the Colts, though, and they traded him to the Rams.
Sorry, wrong way. It's been 30 years.
Did they mentor Lawrence Phillips, and that was a disaster?
Phillips was a disaster being drafted. Okay? But, like I said, that was 1990, you know? So
yeah, it's been 20 years.
I get the teams backward. That's been a while ago.
Yeah.
I'm still mourning the fact that it's going to be 40 years till the 80s here in a couple years. So, you know.
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, it's, you know, there is historical reference to it about those players and how good they can be. So, I mean, I see him as more of an H-back, kind of in that Natron Means type role. of, hey, we need you here, he can get here.
Do you think this next fullback I'm going to mention is an H-back, or is he a situational goal line back? That's Khaled Hill out of Michigan. He's 6'2", 257, had 10 rushing touchdowns last year, and he blocked well for Devian Smith. So you'd like to see him used more in running situations, but he's great in the goal line. I sort of see a Mike Tolbert type H-back because he can line up at tight end as well. So I sort of see him being a goal line player like Tolbert. I know it's crazy to compare a fullback to Tolbert, but he had 10 rushing touchdowns on limited carries, and that's basically what Tolbert did early in his career. He was used only in the goal line, but he got the job done in the goal line. So I
see him more as a goal line running back and a fullback. I see him as a guy you can do a lot of things with the goal line. Put him in at fullback, put him in at running back, but I don't see him as a complete H-back type. Like you said, goal line and fullback, I think, are going to be his primary positions.
Yeah, I could even see him being used as a number 2 or number 3 tight end in a 3 tight end set at the goal line. So there's a variety of ways you can use him, but I don't think he's as complete as Dimitri Flowers.
Not even close.
Yeah. And then the number 3 fullback we have is J.D. Moore out of LSU. He is arguably the best run-blocking fullback in this class. He opened up lanes for Fournette and Geis. He was 6'3", 229, entering LSU. He's added 12 pounds of muscle over the past 4 years. He's versatile enough to be a fullback or a tight end. You'd like to see him run the ball more, but he lacks vision. He struggles as a pass catcher. His route running is terrible. He drops easy passes on. And other than that, there's no weaknesses to his game, but it's hard to be optimistic when he has all those weaknesses: vision, pass catching, terrible route running. That basically limits him to a blocking fullback role, and the blocking fullback, the pure blocking fullback, has become a dying breed in today's NFL.
Well, it may be a dying breed, but if you're good enough, you can make a darn good living at it. One name I'll bring up from the modern era that made his entire career doing nothing but blocking and doing a damn good job of it, Vickers. Anybody remember him?
Lawrence Vickers out of Virginia Tech, I remember him.
He was the one who, that 3-year stretch where the Browns' rushing attack was actually feared, one of them with Jamal Lewis, with Peyton Hillis. Vickers was the one in front leading the way. Then when he went to Baltimore, after that 3-year stint, what did he do? He made Baltimore's running attack not only relevant, but he made the players relevant. And he gave that attack, and I think they won the Super Bowl behind that rushing attack. So, and Vickers was the one that spearheaded it. So, I mean, he only had a 6-7 year career, but what he did was make these teams a whole heck of a lot better than they were, simply because if you're running behind Vickers, you know you're getting positive yards. So if you have a guy who's a pure fullback, who you know if you're running behind him you're getting positive yards, people are going to take you, and people are going to want you. The thing is, though, with a player like that, you take a lot of pounding. So, just like Vickers, your shelf life, you're only going to get a 6 or 7 year shelf life, if that. So, I mean, his career will probably be brief, but if he keeps improving, his career will be very noteworthy.
Yes. There's 2 more fullbacks. Next one is Jalen Samuels out of North Carolina State. He actually is a 5'11", 223-pound tight end, but in most scouts' eyes, they have him listed as a fullback, despite being 223 pounds. But he does have some positive qualities. Like, he had 65 receptions, nearly 600 receiving yards, and 7 receiving touchdowns, along with 56 carries, 300 rushing yards, 9 rushing touchdowns, 965 total yards, 16 total touchdowns 2 years ago. This past year, he had 13 total touchdowns, and he can get receiving and rushing touchdowns. So as far as playmaking goes, Jalen Samuels is probably the best fullback. But at 5'11", 223, he doesn't have the body of a tight end. He doesn't have the body of a fullback. But Jalen Samuels probably could be a guy who is excellent in PPR fantasy leagues, despite the fact that he's listed as a fullback in most draft publications, which is kind of strange because he's 5'11", 223, and he's better as a...
If you're 223 pounds, you are not a fullback. If you're 223 pounds...
But he's listed as a H-back on NC State.
Middle linebackers in the NFL, Luke Kuechly will knock him on his ass. He is not opening up that hole. You are not a fullback at 223 pounds. I am sorry.
But he's a fullback / tight end on NC State, and they don't think he's big enough to play tight end in the NFL, so they're saying, oh, maybe he's big enough to play fullback. And it's like, unless he adds 20 pounds of muscle, it's just not going to work.
You better put on 15 to 25 pounds of muscle because, buddy, you ain't cutting it at 223 pounds.
He could be a good running back because he's good at pass catching, but he's not going to be a fullback, so it's like...
Not even close. Not even close. Not a fullback.
Yeah. I don't think he'll get drafted, but he is considered the consensus number 4 fullback. The final fullback, who is Daniel Marks, 6'2", 245. He blocked well for Christian McCaffrey. Their running backs coach left Stanford to go to the Carolina Panthers as a wide receivers coach. So Marks has to be the leader on this offense now. And J.D. Moore, Daniel Marks, I was sort of debating which guy does better as a run blocker. You'd like to see him get more rushing, but he has the same problems that J.D. Moore has. And he is basically a pure fullback, a pure blocking fullback. And C.J.D. Moore. But Thomas thinks Daniel Marks is the best fullback in the draft. So we'll see. Those are the top 5 fullbacks. And really quickly here, Kerm and I will get to some hockey predictions for the Stanley Cup this year. I'm going to say it's Edmonton over Boston. I did a Boston preview the other day. I really like their defense. They are stacked. I'm going to go out on a limb and say they're the team that ends the Penguins' three-peat run, and we get a Edmonton-Boston Stanley Cup. Connor McDavid wins in 6 games in TD Garden and hoists the first Stanley Cup for Edmonton since 1990. And they played the Bruins 30 years ago in 1988 when Bork was a captain on Boston, when Gretzky was a captain on Edmonton. So I'm going to say we get a Edmonton-Boston Stanley Cup Finals this year. Kerm, what's your thoughts on this before we get to some other topics?
I think Nashville may not lead the Western Conference champion. It depends on how they respond to being Stanley Cup losers. It's hard to make the playoffs again after you lose the Stanley Cup. But they do have that young nucleus who might just make them like the 09 Penguins who won the Stanley Cup after losing it in 08 to the Detroit Red Wings.
It sounds like you're going with a rematch where Nashville wins.
I don't know. It all depends. I'm still say the Penguins and the Capitals are the 2 teams to beat in the East. And I think I'm going to go Predators and 1 team in the West. And the other, well, might just be the Kings because they have an on and off with every other year. It seems like they can have me make it. But last year they didn't do that. So this year they must just do it again.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we'll see what happens there. I was going to let Ryan mention something interesting about a prospect he watched. He hasn't called in yet, though, so Some of the things that happened, the Oakland Athletics streak from Moneyball got broken this weekend. The Cleveland Indians, my favorite MLB team, broke the streak. They lost the Royals on Friday in extra innings, but they won the division last night. The Astros can win the division with Justin Verlander on the mound tonight. I think they'll get that taken care of. The Washington Nationals have already clinched the National League East. The Dodgers are very close to clinching the NL West. The only two divisions up for grabs at this point are the AL East, which is coming down to Boston and the Yankees, and the NL Central, which is down to three teams, the Cardinals, the Brewers, and the Cubs. The Cubs are probably going to win that division again, I would think, because they just seem like the best team out of those three, but it's still, those teams are still mathematically in it, and we'll provide you with a few more of these baseball updates next week. I think whoever comes out of the AL, whether it's Cleveland or Houston, that's going to be the team that wins the World Series, because Cleveland and the Dodgers just look so complete on paper this year. And back in March, I said we'd get the Dodgers and the Indians, with Cleveland winning in 7 games. I'm still sticking by that, but I could see the Astros, I could see the Nationals, I could see the Cubs, I could see the Red Sox, I could see any of the 6 division winners making the World Series. Because Boston has a good team when they put it together. Cleveland, Houston, those were my 3 preseason division winners. And then last year's division winners in the NL, Washington, the Dodgers, the Cubs, all leading their divisions again. So I could see any of those 6 teams in the World Series. It's really too early to say with baseball right now. We will try to break that down a little bit later in October, on October 1st, whenever that is. We're not going to worry about that right now, though, because there's still a lot of football left to be played, and you can tell that football is where the ratings at, because they used to have MLB games on Saturday nights, but they flexed them to noons with the emergence of Fox Sports getting the college football rights to broadcast games. So that's one of the big things that caused them to alter that. So that's pretty impressive. You want to talk about that game you saw on Wednesday in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Kerm? Atlanta United FC had a 7-0 win over the Revolution.
Revolution had a player sent off in the 10th minute for stopping on a guy's ankle. If they had been sloppy the whole, and already had 2 cautions at that time, with your yellow cards coming in, this player was sent off for reading on the video goal scoring, and so that was an easy call. And then half hour into the game, you had a second player sent off for a handball in the penalty area, and that was a direct denial of a goal scoring opportunity because the net was empty behind him. He was the last safe defender, so there was no way for him to. So that was a direct goal. So they. Martinez penalty kick, and made it 3-0, and that was all she wrote. Everything was Atlanta was up 3 goals and up 2 men, so everything was just downhill from there for them for New England Revolution.
Yeah, because they were down 2 guys. It was 11-9. It was unfair at that point.
Fun fact is the 3 games that have been played at Mercedes-Benz, Atlanta has scored 13 goals and only given up 3. And that was the 3 they gave up yesterday to at City, which was a 3-3 tie.
Very interesting stuff. I want to get Kerm's quick thoughts here. I'm guessing that the NASCAR playoffs starting today, I'm guessing it's going to go through Truex Jr., because you've got him. I think the challengers would probably be Kyle Busch, Jimmy Johnson, Harvick, maybe Hamlin can be a dark horse. Chase Elliott, don't think he's ready to take that next step yet, but the 2 drivers on the hot seat, which of the guys outside of the top 12 do you think's on the hot seat and needs this win the most? You've got Casey Kane, Austin Dillon, Matt Kenseth, and Jamie McMurray. I feel like Kenseth needs this the most, and he's the one guy in this group that's most likely to sneak into the top 12. Any thoughts on?
I agree. Kenseth is the one that's most likely. If any new ones do come out, he could be the one that's most likely. But like I said, this will go through Martin Truex Jr. He's been the most consistent driver throughout the year.
I would
This
think.
championship will go through him.
I agree with that. I think it will go through him, and I would say the only driver who's on the hot seat or in jeopardy is Jamie McMurray. But there's still 3 races before they narrow it down from 16 to 12. So as long as you win a race, you're in the next round, I believe.
McMurray's not really in any jeopardy. He has the right next year. The only person that's in the playoff that doesn't have him, I think 2 that don't have confirmed right for next year. That's Kurt Busch in the Stuart Haas State 41, and then Matt Kenseth. He is out of the 20 and Joe Gibbs. There's been no confirmed right from him for next year. Yeah, so he might be forced to retire due to not having a ride next year.
Yeah, and right now we got some news. The Durham Bulls, the Tampa Bay Rays minor league team, they have just won the South League. The Tampa Bay Rays AAA team, the Durham Bulls, they have just won the International League for minor league baseball last night, and Pacific Gulf Coast League between the Springfield Redbirds and the El Paso Chihuahuas is tied 2 games apiece in the Pacific Gulf Coast League. Game 5 of that minor league baseball championship will be tonight. That's just for AAA, and I'm just looking at those AAA things here. We probably should get to Kerm's NFL predictions. I'm trying to buy some more time to see if we can get Ryan on the show, but I mean, with AAA over, I just feel like there's not going to be any AA news. It's not worth exhausting ourselves over, and let's just get to the Kerm's predictions, because I've already discussed my predictions with Joey on the Evolution Network, and I'll just ask Kerm his predictions for each game, and we'll be on to the next show for I'll mention next week's show real quickly. Cleveland and Baltimore in Baltimore.
I'm going to have to go with the Ravens on this one. Seems to be the East. While the Browns are stubborn to come back, they are afraid to carry their best on the Browns. So I'm going to have to go with Baltimore.
All right, the next game features I believe it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Chicago Bears. Yep, it's in Tampa.
I'm going to have to go with the Buccaneers on this one. And this will be their first game out of the season, because they was postponed last week due to Irma. So I'm going to have to go with the Buccaneers. I'm still going to go with the Buccaneers.
All right, Ryan just showed up on the call. If you want to make some picks with Kerm, you can. The first 2 games we did were Ravens, Browns, and the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers-Bears game. So do you want to make 2 predictions for those games before we get to the 4th game on this list?
For the Buccaneers-Bears game, I'm going to say that Tampa Bay actually wins it in a very nice fashion, 34-20.
All right,
and
so
what was the other game?
The Ravens host the Browns.
The Ravens. Honestly, I kind of feel like the Ravens might keep Cleveland to under 13 points. So let's say Ravens 24, Cleveland 13.
Very good stuff, Ryan. All right, so next game features Minnesota and Pittsburgh. I have the Steelers winning this 17-14, and I discussed these games with Joey on the Evolution Network. But Kerm, who do you like in this one? Or should we start with Ryan and then go to Kerm? Take turns.
Whatever order's clever. But I'd rather have Kerm go first because he's a true gentleman.
Thank you, Ryan.
I'm going to have to go with the Steelers on this one.
Well, you guys already know who I'll pick. I'll go with the Vikings on that one.
Sam Bradford's knee is a big mystery right now, and Adam Schefter ruled earlier that it is a game-time decision, so if he's out, the Steelers probably win, but we'll see what happens with the game-time decision. Next game features the Patriots and the Saints. Go ahead, Kermit, you can pick here.
Patriots are going to bounce back from last Thursday's disappointing loss. I think they're handling this one easily.
You know, I got to agree with Kerm. I think they win very easily. I think that New England defensive game plan is just going to destroy that line of the Saints. So I'll even say New England wins 38-24.
Next up, we're on to Kansas City. The Eagles, they come to Kansas City. Chiefs are favored in this game. Ryan, go ahead. Start us off with this one.
You know, after what I saw Kansas City do with the New England Patriots last week, I'll give the full edge to the Chiefs. And honestly, I think they win probably 34-31. I think it'll be competitive, though.
Kerm, who do you like in this one?
I'm gonna have to agree with Ryan on this one.
Next up, we go to Jacksonville. It's Tennessee and Jacksonville. Kerm, who do you like in this one?
I'm gonna have to go with the Titans to get back at 500 and 1-1.
You know, I'm almost on the bandwagon trade for the Jacksonville Jaguars, but I just don't see them maintaining against Tennessee and like their explosive style run game. And I think Mariota has a better pass game because they play a weaker defense. So I'll say the Titans probably win by at least a field goal.
The next game features the Arizona Cardinals without David Johnson and the Indianapolis Colts without Andrew Luck. I'm guessing we're all taking the Cardinals.
Yeah, that Colts team is a disaster without Andrew Luck. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a team struggle like that since they went that one season without Peyton before they got Andrew Luck. So it kind of goes to show you that that quarterback position is key down there in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you, Ryan. We say, yes, the team is bad. Mike Westbrook was immediately. That's a team that's here that Peyton did not play.
Next game features the Buffalo Bills and the Carolina Panthers. This is the final early game. Ryan, I'll let you pick this one first, and then we'll go to Kerm.
You know, this is actually going to be my upset of the week. I think that the Bills may actually beat the Panthers, and then I'm going to say that they barely do so, 27-24. But just a quick side note, looking forward to the Panthers because they just signed Bucky Hodges' practice squad.
I'm going to say this will be an upset. That's for a win, but the Bills cover the 7-point spread.
That's what I have, too. I have the Panthers winning 31-28 in a shootout by a field goal. I think either way, the game, it could go either way, but I think it's going to be decided by a field goal.
You know, after I saw the Bills play last week a little bit from the highlights, I'm actually kind of excited to watch them play.
Next up, we have the Jets and the Raiders. And Oakland, we're all taking the Raiders. I'm guessing.
Yeah, if anyone here picks the Jets, they don't get to come on the show for a week.
So we're just going to start handing out suspensions like Roger Goodell.
Heck yeah, this is like Goodell Utopia Network now.
Goodell Utopia Network.
Oh, you mean I could sleep in for a week if I wouldn't say 6 days,
All of a sudden, picking the Jets seems enticing. Kerm and Joey, their ideas about vacation, yeah, this sounds really good. I could take a week off and drink a beer.
You know, Joey already saw the Hurricanes pass. I mean, dude, this is really his ideal time to get a suspension.
No, but I'm going to have to go with the Raiders.
Yeah, the Raiders should win this
I'll go with the
easily.
Raiders.
Except for with me getting a suspension, I still work on Sundays, so I would have to get a suspension from the Evolution Network, and unfortunately, I'm not going to suspend myself. So, I mean, that unless I want to go live on my phone from the beach or something like that.
Yeah.
That would be a nice.
I don't think anybody wants to see me live from the beach. So.
I was going to say, so you're saying Renate built like that?
Kerm wants to see me live from the beach.
We would be blinded by Joey's pasty white skin.
Yeah, I was actually told when I went back to Ohio that I'm the only guy in history that can spend a year in Florida and come back with no tan.
It must be like watching a live gallon of milk walk around.
So, I know.
Yeah, it's something similar, yeah.
And came back with no tan, and I was in the sun every day.
All right, next up we have the Dolphins and the Chargers in Los Angeles. They're the LA Galaxy. They went to Toronto, so they won't be hosting. Wait, they were the team on the top of the screen, so I think they were hosting at the StubHub Center. So the Los Angeles Galaxy lost to the best team in pro soccer 4-0, and now they've renovated the place. They're cleaning it out for the Los Angeles Chargers. So will StubHub Center receive back-to-back shutouts? After the Galaxy getting shut out, now the Chargers get shut out by the Dolphins. Are we looking at back-to-back shutouts for the Chargers, or do the Chargers come up with the win like I expect them to?
Chargers should come up with the win. I saw them play against the Broncos and stuff like that, and they're definitely a really good inter-division opponent. They play hard smash mouth football, and based on how Miami plays, I'm going to say the Chargers definitely win by at least 6 points.
This is going to be my upset pick of the week. I'm going to have to go with the Dolphins.
3 out of 5 writers at Draft Utopia, excluding myself and Tanya Holmes, have gone with the Dolphins. Oren, Jesse, and Jason, who were all tied for first place heading into week 2, all picked the Dolphins. So I'm not sure if you can count this as an upset.
Vegas has them. They has the Chargers favored by 3.5.
I got 4.5, but yeah.
Yeah, I got 6. I just don't see the Dolphins scoring that much on that defense.
I got the Chargers winning 28-23, but let's move on to Seattle. We're on to Seattle. I'm going to put up my hoodie like Bill Belichick and tell people that we're on to Seattle. And 49ers, Seahawks. Seattle should win this. Motion passed. Let's move on to the next game. Can I pass the motion and ring the gavel, Joey? Or do we have to hear Kerm and Ryan's reasoning on why the Seahawks will win and why the 49ers won't win before I pound the gavel?
I'll speak for both of them and say because the 49ers suck.
You represent me so well, Joey. Thank you.
All those in favor for the 49ers losing to Seattle? Motion passes. They used to do that all the time at SGA at Slippery Rock. It was fun. Next up, we have another game in LA. This one in the Coliseum, where we saw double overtime between Texas and USC. That stadium is being cleared out for another game in the NFL between Sean McVay's former team and Sean McVay's current team. And I like the Rams 28-27 in a win here, and majority of our writers have the Rams winning this game. So Washington's secondary looked very suspect. So I like the Rams in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with the Rams as well.
Yeah, you gotta love the Rams. I mean, especially with the way Jared Goff is turning out. I'm really looking forward to watching him play too against the weaker Redskins secondary.
And then,
although on paper they look good, but
And Dallas and Denver, it's in Denver, and this Dallas enters as a 2-point favorite. This was a lock of the week on Draft Utopia and on the Evolution Network. So, it's Kerm's team and Ryan's team. I feel like we should save this for last because this is a game that it's Kerm's favorite team versus Ryan's favorite team. So yeah, I am gonna put this game on hiatus, and we're gonna go straight to the Monday night game between the Lions and the Giants. And I know I'm going in reverse order, but Falcons Packers is game of the week, and I want to wrap it up with Kerm and Ryan's favorite teams. This is probably one of the rare instances where I'll go out of order on a game because I want to save the best for last. And I know Kerm's a Cowboys fan. Ryan's favorite team is the Broncos. That's a game we're saving for last in this rare circumstance. So, Giants and host the Lions on Monday night. Odell Beckham is expected to play. Does that mean game, set, and match for the New York Giants?
Absolutely not, because you don't know how much Odell Beckham Jr. has actually recovered from an injury, and if he'll still be as explosive as he was.
That sounds like you're picking the Lions.
Oh God, no, I'm not that dumb. I'll still that defense is way too solid, especially against Stafford. I honestly think that Stafford might throw at least 2 interceptions this game, and I think St. Pierre ends up getting at least 1 sack.
Yeah, well, I'm going to agree with what Ryan said. While I'm not going to expect them to is or is not going to do, that's not going to change the final scoreline of a Giants win.
Yep, next game is the Sunday night game. It's the game of the week. It's the Packers and the Falcons, and I'm the only one who had the audacity to pick the Falcons. I picked them to win 38-13, and after that, yeah. So, who do you guys like in this game? It's the Packers and the Falcons. Is this a revenge game for the Packers, or are the Falcons going to take care of business this week?
You know, I'm still going to stick with my theory of the Super Bowl hangover, but I think that the Packers will end up making a shootout. I'll actually pick the Packers barely winning 31-28.
Yeah, I'm going to say, how valid that statement is, I'm going to have to go with the Falcons. They keep the noise up, like what happened at the Atlanta United game.
And now we get to the game that we put on hiatus, and for good reason. It's Andrew Kermish's Dallas Cowboys versus Ryan Romero's Denver Broncos. We get to hear Joe Buck narrate this game, which is even better. Maybe not, depending on who you ask, but that was a joke. The Cowboys and the Broncos, since everyone at Draft Utopia has the Broncos losing this game, I'm going to let Ryan make his reasoning for Denver first, and then I'm going to let Kerm make his argument. So, or should we flip a coin? Should we flip a coin where I let Kerm call it in the air, and if he's right, he gets to decide who goes first?
I almost feel like you should flip the coin.
All right, let's flip the coin. Heads or tails, Kerm? Call it in the air.
Heads I win, tails and Ryan loses.
Wait, what?
Heads.
Yeah.
Okay, heads, Kerm goes first. Tails, Ryan goes first. And it is heads, so Kerm goes first.
Fake news. Kerm's not my debater. Just kidding.
But he's a master at it.
He's a master debater?
He's your master debater.
Alright, Kerm, go ahead.
I think this is going to be an easy Cowboys win. As long as everybody plays like they're up to you, they play mental. I don't see the Cowboys. I don't see the Broncos making a huge deal out of it. Because Osweiler who's even starting at quarterback for the Broncos?
Trevor Siemian, he did well last night, and Ryan's brother would have to take over the team in order for Brock Osweiler to see the field. I think that's the only way he gets to start.
Yeah, there's no way in heck that anyone outside of Trevor starts that position. Especially after the way he plays, he actually looks like a real quarterback for the first time that we've seen since Peyton Manning left.
He looked like a real boy. I want to be a real boy, Joe.
So Trevor Siemian is Geppetto or Pinocchio by Joey's logic.
Apparently, there's definitely a Disney theme to football. Apparently.
Does that make Paxton Lynch Simba with his 70s mustache?
Have been bought by Disney.
So does that make Paxton Lynch Simba with his 70s mustache or no?
Honestly, I'm a fan of the mustache. I feel like Paxton Lynch has a career outside of football and acting, possibly as a Burt Reynolds, actor for one of his autobiographies.
Yeah, Burt Reynolds Paxton Lynch movie. I like it. Maybe The Longest Yard 3, where Sandler coaches the team out of jail, and Paxton Lynch has to come in. And then he hears the story, and then Burt Reynolds is Paxton Lynch's grandpa in The Longest Yard 3.
Then apparently, since Disney bought Tampa Bay, we could even get Pirates of the Caribbean in this movie, too.
Yes. Pirates of the Crabs. I don't know. Trying to think of some
I
Pirates.
can't tell if that's a porn movie or not. The people really got the porn.
I'm trying to think of something involving Jameis Winston and crab legs in Pirates of the Caribbean. And Pirates of the Crabs is all I can come up with. Okay. But seriously, Ryan likes the Broncos. Go ahead and make your case for the Broncos.
Alright, so now, all joking aside, I must say, though, I think the Broncos have a strong chance of winning. I think they take advantage of Dak Prescott and his aggressive style play. I think you're going to see Chris Harris Jr. end up jumping a lot of those routes and possibly getting at least 2 interceptions. I feel like the Cowboys' offensive line isn't quite as good as what it was a year ago. Are they going to be able to triple team Von Miller this whole game without giving up a sack? I don't think so. I think that they're too stacked on defense. As far as the offensive side of things go, I actually like that matchup with the Broncos offense against Dallas' defense better, especially after the play I saw with Trevor last week. He did some really good passing. One play in particular where he was rolling out by the end zone, he was able to keep focused and still throw an accurate pass. So I really like the flashes that he's showing so far. So I think the Broncos can easily win. I think it's going to be fairly close, though. 38, 35 type of thing. There's no way that either of these teams score less than 30 points.
Interesting. Do you want to mention what you saw?
Dak is on pace for the fewest interceptions and 500 passes. What makes you think he's going to throw one tonight? When he's already thrown 4 throughout his entire career.
I just feel like he plays too aggressive football. I think the Broncos secondary is much more patient than the type of play that the NFC plays with. So I think that ends up actually toying with Prescott a little bit, and I think he ends up getting frustrated today.
You see Prescott as an aggressive passer? This time, I think he's not aggressive enough.
I think he has an aggressive ball. It's just one of those things where when I watch him on film, I think he's a great player. I mean, of course, I was prepared to draft him. I just think when he plays, he makes his decisions too quickly, and I think that the Broncos are going to end up taking advantage of that today.
Interesting stuff. Do you want to mention Luka Doncic, the player you watched and did an article on really quickly before we wrap this up, Ryan, and preview next week's show?
Oh, yeah. Now, I can't say his last name that great, but Luka Doncic, great shooting guard, small forward, did a piece on him earlier this week, talking about a kid that's 6'7", has really good handles, and he can step back about 5 feet beyond the 3-point mark and actually nail some of those shots, and he has some precision like passing, kind of like the way Ben Simmons had at LSU. So he's definitely showing a lot of potential. He does pick and roll quite well. He can even pass through defenders' legs. So the skill set definitely seems to be there, as a lot of people know. I'm normally not big or sold on EuroLeague players, but in this case, I'm actually pretty sold on him as a shooting guard or small forward.
Yeah. Kerm and I did do some Stanley Cup predictions, but if you want to pass on hockey, we can pass on that. We'll preview next week's show and put Ryan's prediction for the Stanley Cup on a cliffhanger because we got a lot we need to cover as well. And next week we'll be on Talkshoe at 9:30 a.m. with a Ravens-Jaguars feed. It won't be on YouTube, but it will be on Talkshoe only. And if I get any emails saying don't put this on Talkshoe or whatever, then we'll reschedule and do a Friday show with Thomas and Tracy or whatever. We'll see what happens throughout the week. But right now, as it stands, we're leaning towards doing like an actual live update or live thread on Talkshoe for the London game. But we'll see what happens. We'll see. We're not going to make any promises yet, but that's currently what's being planned for next week. But we'll see what happens here. This is Chris Ransom, along with Joseph Potter, Andrew Kermish of the Evolution Network, along with Ryan Romero of Draft Utopia. We are the Utopia of Sports. We will be back next Sunday with coverage of Ravens versus Jaguars, pending something last minute. So long. Enjoy Week 2 in the NFL.